Jim Boxold was named Secretary of the Florida Department of Transportation by Governor Rick Scott in December 2014. As Secretary, he is focused on improving the transportation network to benefit visitors and Florida's economic growth, as well as the benefit of our residents. Under Governor Scott, the state has significantly increased its transportation investments, providing the largest work program in the department's 100-year history 2 years in a row. These investments are paying off. Florida's transportation infrastructure is consistently ranked among the best in the country by the U.S. Chamber Foundation. Secretary Boxold has challenged FDOT employees to build on that success by emphasizing innovation, continuing to seek ways to be more efficient in its operations, and leveraging Florida's exceptional position to improve the state's transportation system even more. Please come up. Welcome, Jim Boxold.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's great to see you all again. I think I was here about a year ago, almost exactly. So I did hear some of you chuckling at the notion that I might have been stuck in traffic on my way to Tallahassee. I will tell you that that has never happened to me since I became Secretary of Transportation. It's a modern-day miracle. I have gotten held up. I've had meetings run over. I've even overslept from time to time, but I've never once been stuck in traffic. But it is very good to be here today. There were obviously a lot of folks on the road still going home after Thanksgiving, so we were certainly moving along with them. I do want to start by talking about where Florida is as a state, because I think that that's a big part of the transportation story here in Florida. If you go back a couple of years, our unemployment rate was about over 10%. It's down to 4.7% now. Our job growth has exceeded the national rate for 54 consecutive months. We last year had a record number of tourists, and if you think about it, we have 20 million residents here in the state. Last year we had well over 100 million tourists, so on any given day, there's 5 visitors wandering around for each one of us. And you all in the beach communities know that very well, and the unique demands that that puts on our transportation network. We were very fortunate to have a governor and a legislature that recognized the importance of transportation. It is the building block for all of the issues that we care about. For the last 3 years, the department has had record funding in excess of $10 billion. By the end of his term, the governor will invest over $1 billion in our airports, $1 billion in our ports, and $1 billion in our rail. And it's easy to get lost in $1 billion here and $1 billion there, but if you think about the average port project is $10 or $15 million. The average airport project is $40 or $50 million. You've got to add up a lot of those projects to get to $1 billion over 8 years. And you can certainly see the cyclical effect of those investments. The more that we invest in transportation, the better our economy does. The better our economy does, the more we need to invest in transportation. At Florida DOT, we're very proud of our legacy. Florida is recognized as a leader in transportation across the country. The U.S. Chamber Foundation consistently ranks Florida's transportation infrastructure first or second in the nation. Out of the 10 fastest growing ports in the entire country, 4 of them are right here in Florida. We have other states that have, if you look up at Georgia, really 1 or 2 ports that they invest in, and they look at that as a benefit where they can pour a lot of money into one port and have a tremendous return. We have 15 deep water ports in Florida. That is a challenge for the department to make those investments across that many ports. But what we found is, the shipping business, like everything else, isn't monolithic. There isn't one port, there isn't one solution. It's important to have a variety of different ports competing at every level of the shipping industry. And so it's no coincidence that you end up with 4 of the 10 fastest growing ports. Last year, I think I was here right after it was announced, there is something called America's Transportation Awards, which recognizes the top transportation projects in the country. Last year, we won both of them. The first state to ever do that. We won both the People's Choice Award and the top national award. We followed up this year. We didn't, steal the show and win both again. We thought we'd give other states an opportunity to compete. But we did win the People's Choice Award for our Ella Drive project, which is a port-related project down at Port Everglades. And essentially what it is a direct connection from the port to the interstate. And that matters not only for cargo, but it also matters for people that use Port Everglades for cruise ships. And it's something that these folks probably don't even think about as they drive into the port. That's the thing about transportation. If we're doing our job right, and if it's working, people don't even think about it. All they pay attention to is they got from the interstate, they got to their parking lot, they got on the cruise ship, and didn't think twice about it. As was mentioned during the introduction, I sort of have established 3 priorities for the department: innovation, efficiency, and excellence. You'll notice I talked about our national awards. With an agency of engineers, they're very task-oriented. They have sort of a list of things that they do, and they finish it, and they go on to the next one. And they finish it, and they go on to the next one. And so we're not very good about telling our story, and we're certainly not very good about celebrating our successes. But in order to keep everybody fueled up for that next challenge, it's important to stop and take a break before you go to the next task and celebrate our successes. But the other 2 are innovation and efficiency. And so I want to talk about those 2 things for a minute. If you look at innovation, actually there's an innovative interchange going in just up the road that we are very focused on. It is the first of its kind in Florida, and it will make a tremendous difference in the function of that interchange. I think when I was here last year, we had just kicked off the project, or we're just kicking it off, and sort of concerned about whether we would stay on track. We've got a World Rowing Championship that we're focused on. We committed, the department committed. It was the previous secretary, but like all promises the department makes, it's a department promise to get it open before the World Rowing Championship. And so I'm excited to tell you that that will in fact occur. Sometimes in my job we make promises, we make commitments, and we're not, for reasons sometimes beyond our control, sometimes because of our own, not able to keep them. And I'll give you an example. During the hurricane, Hurricane Hermine, which actually hit Tallahassee, I don't know if any of you down here heard about that, but Tallahassee, the better part of Tallahassee, was without power for 4 or 5 or 6 days. There's a lot of special people in Tallahassee. Certainly a lot of people that believe themselves to be special. So you can imagine the challenges of going without power for 4 or 5 days. I did it. It's not any fun. But we were challenged by the governor to do a little bit more than we normally do. And so typically after a storm, we'll go through and we'll clear down trees, get them out of the road. We call it cut and toss. It means exactly what it says. You cut the tree, toss it out of the way. And the notion is to allow traffic to move quicker. But what we found is when you have trees that are entangled in power lines, that's not a safe situation for our contractors. You don't know if it's live or not. And so typically what they'll do is they'll bypass it, and they'll keep moving up down the road. Well, what happens is when the power company comes through to restore power, they've got to untangle that line, get the tree, a task that we would normally do. And so given the slow pace of power restoration, I think the second or third day, 80% of the city was still without power. The governor challenged us to do a little bit better job. And so what we ultimately settled on was taking our cut and toss crew and combining them with the utility, with a line worker crew. That way the line workers could verify whether the line was live or not. If it was, ground it out so that our crews could work safely. And it was a tremendous safety improvement for our crews to have that expertise with them. But what it allowed is when the power company then came through, which we were coordinating with, they were giving us sites to clear, we were going out ahead of them. When the line restoration crew from the power company would come through, they didn't have to worry about all of that. They would just go, string the line, and run down the way. And so it made a tremendous difference in getting power restored. But the reason I brought this story up is we committed to the governor that we would have these joint crews out on 8 a.m. Sunday morning. Everything was all set. We had contractors coming in from out of the area. We were going to make it happen. I made a promise to my boss we were going to keep it. My boss is just like yours, right? You can imagine the fun phone call I got at 6:30 the next morning, an hour and a half before these crews had been promised to the governor to be out working, telling me that they'd been held up. Out of town, in traffic actually, and weren't going to be there. And so made a couple phone calls, really not sure what else to do. Certainly didn't make the phone call that I'm obligated to make to the governor to tell him we're not going to make 8 a.m. for the crews being out there working. And so I laid down on my living room floor and I stared at the ceiling for a while. And fortunately, we have a very good crew at the department that figured out a different solution. We were able to pull together another utility crew and get our crews out there by 8 a.m. and keep the commitment. So much like that, I'm proud this morning that when we talk about the Diverging Diamond Interchange, that I can tell you we're on track, we're on schedule. We're going to meet our commitment to open it before the World Rowing Championship because this stage doesn't look particularly comfortable to lay down and stare at the ceiling. The other priority that I've established is efficiency. And you heard me talk about record funding. 3 years of $10 billion plus in funding is an extraordinary amount of resources for the department. And so, people might wonder why we focus on efficiency, why we focus on saving every little penny. If you look at our work program, it's probably 5,000 or 6,000 transportation projects. So if you can come up with a more efficient way to do your business on one of them, and then repeat it on all of the others, pretty soon you're talking about a significant amount of money, and it's a significant amount of money that can be reinvested into the rest of the projects that we do. So we are very focused on efficiency and finding better and smarter ways to do our business. One of the things that I do want to talk about is some of the projects that are going on locally. Obviously, the investments that we make a tremendous difference to the businesses and to the people that live here. We have a significant number of interstate projects. I've talked about the Diverging Diamond Interchange. We also have the State Road 70 Interchange, which was moved up, advanced from 2023 to 2018 for construction. We also have the 75 and 301 interchange. The construction was advanced from 2099, which is basically, I don't know how many secretaries that is from now. One of the things I always talk about is that's a problem for another day. You solve the problems you can today, sometimes it's a problem for another day. That is definitely a problem for some other day. But we moved it from 2099 to 2020. And that's a reflection not only of our budget, but of the growing demand here in Manatee. And then obviously we talked about the University Parkway. We have a significant number of projects underway at the port. I know, looking at my commission friends, that we struggled with the port and getting that moving. I love Port Manatee. It has a tremendous amount of potential. It's nothing but upside. It sort of reminds me of my friends in the agriculture business who are land rich and cash poor. And so we had to interact with the port a little bit differently to make those projects work, but we've got the cold storage facility moving forward and some other investments. We are also focused, talking about traffic and season, on projects related to the island bridges. Obviously, the bridge to Cortez is different than a lot of other projects that we do. Cortez is unique. I think it's incumbent upon the department to recognize that it is different, it is unique, and that we've got to come up with a solution with the community to meet those needs. And then in early 2017, we'll have a public hearing to go through the alternatives that we're looking at, including a no-build alternative, and make sure that we get the right solution for Cortez. I passed Anna Maria on my way in here. We are working on the bridge replacement for that. The thing that I think is remarkable about the AMI bridge replacement is the aesthetics committee. A lot of folks are concerned about the department not understanding that what we build matters to the community. It matters how it looks, and it's got to integrate with the uniqueness of each community. So we have an aesthetics committee that several folks from the local community are helping pick out colors, designs, and things that will make sure it blends in and is the proper gateway to Anna Maria. And obviously, we have other projects on the works. On 15th Street East, we're doing a project that will include bike lanes, trails, a roundabout, and mid-block crossings. Obviously, this is reflective of the department's growing focus on bicycle and pedestrian safety. As many of you know, the department has adopted a complete streets policy, and what that means is that we treat all of our road users equally. And so it shouldn't matter if you're in a car, or you're walking, or you're on a bicycle. We want to make sure that you're safe using our facility. And a lot of times that means changes to the way that we design roads to slow traffic down. And if you think about the State Road Department or the DOT from 15 or 20 years ago, where we were focused on throughput, and what that means is more vehicles faster. And so you think about, we're now talking about reducing lane widths because narrower lanes cause drivers to drive slower. We actually have a process to approve the elimination of lanes. Think about that from the Department of Transportation's perspective. When we were focused on maximizing capacity and maximizing throughput, we now recognize that you can't build the same road in every community, that the road that we build has to be designed for that particular area. We're not going to build the same road in downtown Orlando that we would build in rural Wauchula. And so we want to recognize that those features need to be unique and context sensitive. And so I think the 15th Street project is a great example of that. We are also working on the Central Manatee Networks alternatives analysis, which I think it's fair to say is not moving as fast as anyone would like, but it is an important project. And again, it's sort of like what we're doing with the bridge projects, making sure that we involve the local community to get the right solution. And we hope to have recommendations for that in spring of 2017. And so I know hopefully you all have some questions. I didn't drive 4 hours to talk at you. But I do want to, particularly looking at the commissioners there, talk about the importance of partnerships. And the department values our partnerships. Sometimes we struggle to be a good partner and find the right way to interact with the local government and the local community. But it's incumbent on us to do that. And one of the stories that I like to tell to sort of make sure people understand that we value partnerships, 100% of my construction program is outsourced. I don't own a single paving machine. We're responsible for thousands and thousands of lane miles in this state. Don't own a single paving machine. Talk about laying on the floor and staring at the ceiling when you need a paving machine. But in order for us to do our business, in 100% of our construction program, it's outsourced. 80% of our design, 70% of our right-of-way is a significant amount of reliance and partnership with the private sector. And so as we deal with local communities, as we work on projects to make sure that we're solving the problem the community actually has, not the one we think they have, the one that they actually have, we've got to take that solid partnership approach that we've developed in the delivery of our projects and apply it to the development of our projects. And so certainly look forward to continuing to work with the commission and the others here in Sarasota and Manatee to make sure that we build the projects that will continue the economic growth and the great success we've seen in this region. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I'm not familiar with that particular one, but I want to talk about roundabouts and why the department has made it an emphasis. And we have 7 geographic districts in the state. Obviously, it's a big state, a big department. And we've challenged each of our districts to come up with 2 projects for roundabouts. And this is part of the larger focus that we have on safety. What we found is that roundabouts reduce the severity of crashes by 80%. Obviously, it's a lot slower. You reduce the sort of impact points when you have a roundabout. And so you have crashes in roundabouts, but they don't typically tend to be as severe as at intersections. One of the areas, and I don't know if Rye Road is a more rural area, one of the things that we worked with, speaking of partnerships, was with our trucking partners on roundabout safety. Obviously, there's a truck apron on the center of the roundabout so that they can navigate it safely. But what we found with several of the trucking companies is they actually recognize that if we build them correctly with adequate space for the truck to make it, obviously that's important, and it will take time for people to recognize the change in the traffic pattern in the roundabout. But our experience with the trucking companies is that they see the benefit of safety, and you keep traffic moving. Speaking of hurricanes and power loss, one of the things that we found during Hurricane Hermine in Tallahassee is obviously our traffic lights are powered by electricity. And so we ended up putting out hundreds of generators across Tallahassee to keep them, those signals functioning. We didn't have to do that at a roundabout. So I'll go back and talk to the team about Rye Road and whether there are things that we need to do, but there are a lot of advantages. They're not the right solution for every intersection. One of the areas where they are challenged, which is why I asked if it was more of a rural area, as you go from a rural to an urban interface, the traffic pattern changes. And so it may be that we need to sharpen our pencil on that one. I don't always realize that I'm being frank. So I've had a couple surprises. I do employee town halls in all of our districts. As a matter of fact, for a week in October, I drove the entire state and went to each of our districts and did employee town halls. And that was the most common comment that I got back, is that I was open and frank and I was honest with people, which makes me sort of wonder about what it was I said that was so direct. But I do appreciate that. Like I said, and I know I was talking about it earlier, I think it took us a while to figure out how to work well together, but I do feel like we've gotten there. And so I appreciate the commission's willingness to sort of stick with us. I know we had the interchange and we had the port and we had a couple of sort of unusual things. I will tell you, I continue to pay a price with the legislature for an ANT's decision to advance the interchange project. But like I've told several legislators that have brought it up to me, that is the right project in the right area at the right time. And that's a decision the department would make every day of the week and twice on Sunday, is to advance that project and get it delivered for this community.
And it's
so,
great for the entire state of Florida.
It is.
To be the largest and the first one here.
Not only that, we have, I think, 2 more coming behind it. And so it is, once the drivers adjust, Obviously, it's very different. The traffic lanes are on the opposite sides of where folks are accustomed to them. But when they see that it moves as quickly as we anticipate that it will, and they make that adjustment, it will make a tremendous difference at that interchange. I've driven it a couple times. You've actually got now a state senator whose law office is on the other side of that state interchange, So I've heard about it from Mr. Stubbe a couple of times. So we we probably have 50 what we call P3s. I know other people use different acronyms. It's sometimes hard at DOT to keep track of all of our acronyms. And usually when I learn them, they change them. We have something called the PPM, which is the Plans Preparation Manual, that I finally figured out what PPM stood for. And now they're going to call it the Design Manual, which is what it actually is. But we have probably 50 P3 projects in the state. We typically use them to advance projects that are funded in outer years. You know, we have a 5-year work program, but then beyond that, we have a 10-year and even further. But we have 3 major P3s that really are the sort of success stories. And, you know, I was talking about we won 2 of America's Transportation, or both America's Transportation Awards. It was for 2 of our P3 projects. And so if you look over in Orlando at the I-4 Ultimate project, that's a project that if we went through our normal procurement would take us 20 or 25 years, because it really is about 15 to 20 individual projects. But by using the private sector and a P3 approach, we're able to deliver that project in 6 years. And so we have Skanska, which is building it, which is a tremendous contractor. But the benefit to us in that project is we went from 20 or 25 years of tearing up Central Florida I-4, the backbone, to 6 years. We also spent and worked with Skanska to increase the Road Ranger service patrols. We're doing lane closures only during off-peak. We took a number of steps to minimize the impact on the traveling public. One of the other P3 projects that I like to talk about is the Port Miami Tunnel. So that is a big reason why the department uses P3s, the ability to deliver projects much quicker than we would have. But there are other benefits to a P3 model. And so if you look at the Port Miami Tunnel, and what that is a tunnel under Biscayne Bay. It's a direct connection between the port and the interstate. Obviously, you built it so that trucks are coming in and out of the port much more quickly. What we found, it's been in operation for a year, is that it's taken an hour travel time off trucks going in and trucks coming out. But even more importantly, that traffic used to go through downtown Miami to get to the port. And we've taken 80% of the port traffic off the downtown streets. So we talk about, you know, walkable streets, a livable community. The benefit of that project to downtown Miami is tremendous. But the reason that I brought it up as a good example of what P3s can do is our P3 program is based on what we call an availability payment. The department and the state pay when that facility is available to the traveling public. So probably 2 or 3 weeks after we open the tunnel, they have these massive turbines that go over the top of the tunnel that are for air quality, keep the air moving. There was a design flaw in the turbines. And essentially what they were doing is the blades were shearing off and chewing up the whole fan. Well, the responsibility for getting that repaired and reopened is on the contractor, on the concessionaire. The tunnel was closed for probably a month. The department didn't pay a single dollar during that. So you think about the incentive that contractor had to get the problem identified and fixed and reopened. And so not only did the state benefit from the fact that the motive and the incentive was on the contractor, but we also benefited because it wasn't available and we weren't paying for it. And it was millions of dollars by the time it was repaired and the lost revenue to the contractor from our availability payments. And so P3 projects can be used not only for financing and helping with that, which is probably the most critical part for a local government, but from the department's perspective, where we're not resource challenged now, probably will be in a couple of years when there's another economic downturn, but right now we're not resource challenged, but we look to use that model to obtain other benefits that are not only good for DOT, but good for the citizens of Florida. We do. We actually have a safety office which does part of this, but then we have what we call a department champion, which is responsible for sort of working with local law enforcement and other folks at the local level that is sort of the advocacy internally. And what has been accomplished is this went from sort of a department champion, the department's adoption of the Complete Streets program came out of that. Focused initiative on safety and bicycle and pedestrian safety. Billy Hadaway, who was the district secretary here, was the department's bicycle and pedestrian champion, and now that he's going to the city of Orlando to run their transportation department, we're in the process of identifying the right champion. And so you really want a good mix, right? You want somebody at the right place in the organizational chart, because that matters. It matters tremendously in an agency of 6,000 people. But you also want a person who has the passion and the drive and the commitment, which Billy had. And so Billy left right before Thanksgiving, and we'll find a new champion. It's still the Secretary's initiative, but you need to have somebody that is certainly at the level of in the weeds, making sure these things happen. But obviously, in a state like Florida with year-round weather, we're challenged. People like to get out and bicycle and like to walk around, which is great. That's part of what makes Florida great. But it's a challenge for us to meet that. And I think it's fair to say that we're not as proud of our record on bicycle and pedestrian safety as we could be, but we're working every day to make sure that that's a record we can be proud of. Yes, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, we're introducing it in more areas, in more geographic areas, and we partner either with local governments or a local business to sponsor those. It is tremendously valuable. One of the things that I do as secretary is what we call work days. And essentially what they do is they send me out for the day with some of our folks. And I did a road ranger ride along, which was, there's no other way to understand not only what they do and the challenges. We helped a stranded motorist that needed fuel. We helped someone else that needed their tire changed, and then there was an abandoned vehicle. So I really got, and it was also raining that day, which is, if you're going to be with the road rangers, a rainy day on the interstate's the day to do it. But one of the things that really struck me is we talk about the importance of the move over law. When there's emergency vehicles stopped on the side of the road, it's important to move over. And we talk about it in places like this. We talk about it at our monthly management meetings. Move over is really a priority. Stand on the side of the interstate with cars going by 80 miles an hour. You get a different perspective on the importance of that. But we will continue to expand road rangers as long as we have partners that will help us do it. That's great to hear. I will tell you, I sometimes struggle. That's federally funded. So we deal with Federal Highway Administration an awful lot. It's not always the best relationship. You can imagine the people that provide the funding, that provide the oversight to the department. But those programs that the federal government and Congress fund, because we're really just the pass-through agency for that, are tremendously important. So not only that one, the other one I would point out is what they call Safe Routes to Schools, where we do safety improvements to make sure school children can get there safely. My son walked elementary school. He walked to middle school. He doesn't walk to high school, obviously. It's a little bit further. But those are all tremendously important programs. So I think the department, we get criticized a lot for not supporting transit. I think it's important to recognize we build projects that are local priorities. And the reason that Orlando has Sunrail, which the department built and is operating for the first 7 years, is the MPO there, which is called MetroPlan, made it a priority. And the reason that project was able to be funded is the department does capital, and we help build the system. And so on the capital expenditures, it's 50% federal, 25% state, and 25% local. And then there is a willingness on the part of the department to deliver that project and operate it the first couple of years, sort of work out the kinks. But after that, the locals have to identify a funding source for the long-term operation and maintenance. And so obviously that's an issue in Tampa with the Tampa Bay Express project, which is controversial, partially because of the lack of transit options. But it is also a very high focus in Miami. And if you think about it, it's pretty amazing that Orlando has a mass transit system. Miami has a transit system. It's not a system that's regional in nature. And so they're in the process of going through and identifying 6 potential mass transit projects. And I think it's important to note the department is funding 4 of those. I know we don't like traffic studies, but funding 4 of the 6 studies so that you can get those projects into the point and see which is the one that they ought to move forward with. And once they're able to do that, we'll do the same thing we did with Sunrail, which is help on the capital expenses and then look at sort of short-term involvement in the O&M. But really the critical piece of it is the locals have to make it a priority, and they have to dedicate funding for operation and maintenance over the long haul. And provided those things are the case in Tampa like they are in Miami, the department will be ready to participate. I think last year we spent $500 or $600 million in transit in our budget. So the department is committed to transit, provided we have a willing and able local partner. Probably the closest you'll have is the Tampa Bay Express project, but that's years away. There are obviously some of the bridges and all of that do have the SunPass option. From moving traffic on the interstate and reducing some of those log jams, it's really critical that you add the toll lanes. The department's policy is we don't remove an existing untolled lane. And so I know like some people talk about free lanes. There's no free lane because you're paying for all of it. But there are lanes that are untolled, and so our policy is whatever lanes exist today that are untolled will exist after. But we do look to add toll lanes, and what we found in Miami when we did it on 95 in Miami is you add these express lanes. Is that we increased the average speed by 50%, not only in the lane where people were willing to pay the toll, but 50% in the lane where people didn't want to pay the toll. And so it's one of those things, you introduce these market forces, and the folks that are willing to pay the toll get the benefit, but think about it. Those cars are all now off that main line. And so the folks that are not paying the toll get the benefit as well. There is a lot in terms of managing congestion, and those express lanes provide a pretty significant benefit. So we're looking at it. They can be controversial as they are in Tampa, and with good reason. It's one thing to build a road. It's another thing to build a road where you're putting your hand in somebody's pocket. It's a different relationship. And so the department, I think, is challenged to replicate the success we've seen in Miami and other areas. It is part of the I-4 project in Orlando, and whether the Tampa Bay Express project ever comes online sort of remains to be seen. But it's incumbent on us to figure out the right way to put that project together with the local community. I know they do for young drivers. Obviously, that's on my mind. I've got a 14-year-old. They do give incentives for folks that take driver safety classes. Whether they do that for older drivers, I don't know. That's actually a function of the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles, which is where FHP is housed and which does the license program. But they have found what you just said, which is that older drivers that haven't been through the test in years simply aren't aware of what the laws are. And so they've created a sort of focused effort to get folks' attention and redo that. The other thing that they did, and I don't know what y'all's experience was, the driver handbook that you use to take the driver's license test is not the easiest thing to understand. And it's actually sometimes contradictory. And so they actually went through and cleaned it up and tried to make it a little bit more user-friendly. And you can actually access it out on the web. So I think it's a great point. And I'd certainly be happy to talk to Highway Safety about what more they can do. No, we had a tow truck driver that was killed over the weekend. So it is very important for folks. We do use, I'm sure you've seen the signs that are above the road that have electronic messages. For those of you that want to talk the DOT speak, that's a DMS or a dynamic message sign. But we do use those. You're welcome. You can write it down if you want. But the ones that are on the side of the road that are orange with the tires that are portable, those are VMSs, a variable message board, or VMBs. But in any event, we do try to use whatever tool we can to push out the driver safety messages. You've probably seen the move over law on there, no texting. We use them in sort of the cycle of messages. In addition to traffic information, we try to keep that cycle fresh. Well, that was fantastic. Thank you all very much. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Secretary Boxold, for coming. I mean, you always share the local projects, and you've been a great leader. So we really appreciate you when we go to Tallahassee and when you come and visit us. So thank you for driving from Tallahassee this morning, and we really appreciate you. And thank you all for coming this afternoon. Thank you, Kaiser University and Mosaic, for your sponsorship. We cannot have these events without your support. And Renaissance on 9th, thank you for the fabulous lunch. So first day back from holiday, so welcome back, everybody. Let's get back to work. So thank you all.